The Eternal Pilgrim by Ripley, Webb. Introduction. This is a book about you and me and the people next door. Why we are in trouble, why life is so difficult for most of us. It is no sermon, but an attempt to portray the whole story of mankind as far as the human mind can comprehend it, and revealing the wonder and beauty which the future holds and which underlies the whole sad history of man. No world religion has ever attempted to give a meaning to life other than in symbolic poetry. So we have to interpret that meaning through an effort to understand what the truth is and what life is all about. But before commencing the story, there are some fundamental factors to be considered which make it stand out in relief, as it were. So I beg your indulgence for a few paragraphs. Science and religion have been in opposition for nearly a century, but now they stand facing each other at a crossroads. And such is their present dilemma that they find that they have both disclosed the same eternal truth, which do not quite accord with their teaching. The further science probes the spaceless universe, basing its findings on factual knowledge, the more does the same finite knowledge melt into infinity. The yardstick of time vanishes into a concept of time which is not responsive to measurement. Mariners find themselves charting a course by stars which ceased to exist millions of years ago. There is no longer a physical universe existing independently of any other concept, for energy and matter are constantly changing into one another throughout the universe, with energy as the fundamental condition. It is now accepted that physics have eliminated the notion of substance, and beyond it all, science is beginning to postulate a supreme power, intelligent and creative, which cannot be analyzed, providing a direction which none may plot, following a destiny which has no relation to what is known of evolution by natural selection. As far as Christianity is concerned, at least two bishops have declared that no thinking Christian any longer regards the story of Adam and Eve as anything but a poetic description of the creation of man. Traditional dogma, dating from medieval thinking, has fallen apart as a result of scientific revelation, now itself in question. Man's origin and nature are still as obscure and meaningless as ever. Doctrinal holes which were plugged with faith have widened so that faith itself is unsupported, yet the underlying interest in religion is greater than ever before. But nothing now is taken for granted. In place of orthodoxy has crept a plethora of outlying creeds and cults, some of which provide some sort of common-sense truth, and all finding support for man must lean on something. While science and religion change places at the telescope and the microscope, finding a new background sympathetic to both, so religion and life draw closer together. It becomes difficult to separate them. In the end, science, religion, life, the universe, mankind, all seem ultimately to spring from and be absorbed into that creative wonder we call God. These are all matters to which we have to give some attention if we could understand what life is all about. But before we can become really at one with the idea of Godhead, there are a number of seeming injustices and inconsequences which must be resolved, for they appear to cut right across any idea of goodness attributable to the Creator. The case for the atheist is still potent. Yet it is most difficult to be completely honest and sincere and disbelieve in God. In spite of all the collapse of faith and denials of deity, there is paradoxically an upsurging desire for knowledge and enlightenment in these matters which is worldwide. People of all races are asking, what is man? What is he here for and why? Why does he have to suffer so? Why, if God exists, does he permit evil so much power? Why is the world in which man is sent to live so obviously unfitted for this peaceful development? For the economist tells us that no matter how much the standard of living potential is raised in the coming centuries, the rising birth rate must outstrip all efforts to compete, so that starvation must ever remain just around the corner for millions of the world's inhabitants. During many years of traveling in many countries and of deep thought on these matters, I have seen millions scratching a bare living from unresponsive soil, always on the verge of starvation and falling to ready prey to incipient diseases of appalling severity. We have all noted how polio, malaria, cancer, TB have stricken down otherwise healthy subjects. Witnessing the pathetic results of floods, quakes, famines, I have wondered why God sends daily thousands of souls into the world with a seemingly fantastic disregard for their probable fate. For these incidences are not the result of man's inhumanity to man, and the task of correcting them is utterly beyond us, though great strides have been made. Volumes have been written about man and his origin and purpose, about his sins and his need for redemption, of his hope of the conditional salvation with a ghastly alternative, but now the words are wearing thin. Can it be that our predecessors pinned their faith too strongly to words, which at best are subject to misinterpretation or mistranslation? Words such as love, democracy, happiness, redemption, freedom can have an infinite range of meanings. I am a practicing Christian, but I have long felt that there is something missing in the Christian ethic, a lock with a lost key. In all the world religions, there is the same implication of failure in the human creation. But can God fail? Can a God who obviously must be omnipotent and omniscient and be a God of love plan any creation which is open to failure? One cannot imagine him wondering what is going to happen next or losing control of his creation. God cannot fail. So the search began, delving deeply into the past without prejudice or preconceived ideas, into world religion, into myth and legend, into scientific investigation. For it was patent that the truth of it all was not to be discerned simply by a study of man as we know him today. The perspective had to be widened, in hypothesis to 1,000,000 years of man's life here on earth, and then wider still to before the earth was born, only to find that our understanding of all these matters is packed away in a separate pigeonhole, with no attempt to set them out on a broad canvas. Once this is done, meaning and purpose began to illumine man's life here, and at this point was born in me a deep abiding sympathy for suffering humanity, and is not sympathy akin to love. I realized that I was part of all this manifestation. I belonged to it, and from it alone I held my identity and integrity. The search has been infinitely rewarding, resolving my doubts. In it, time has been transcended, space annihilated, showing our physical earth to be a spiritual reality seen imperfectly through clouded minds, yet infinitely more wonderful and potentially more spiritual than any of us had ever realized. We are seen to be so much more than we know. Quite clearly, such an imaginative review would hold little interest for the average reader if presented in formal or scientific terms or argument. So I have chosen to present my finding in the form of a Wellesian fantasy, yet perhaps not so fantastic as it might seem. For if there are realities underlying our physical existence, they must seem fantastic to those who are still unconsciously inhibited by medieval dogma and outworn tradition, which are no more reliable than the materialistic notions which exercise Victorian minds. The limitations of the human senses are becoming painfully evident and quite incompetent to show us the realities hidden in the universe. We are beginning to see our minds as prisoners of time and space, which are not realities at all except to those imprisoned by them. Truth cannot be taught. It has to be realized by each individual for himself. It cannot be written in words, though it can be written between the lines. So I have attempted to display the tremendous composite picture of man and his real being, which has emerged from this search in the form of an adventure story. For surely that is what it transpires to be, a story which all may read with ease and I hope pleasure. But the essence of it all is contained within the lines, as it must be, just as it is in a parable. That surely is the only way in which to convey ultimate truth, and truth should always be able to speak for itself in this way. The story of man, given herein, shows him to be on a resurgent race, recovering after a cataclysmic fall, and now fast approaching his release from self-imposed bondage. Moreover, the secret of his present predicament is that he holds his identity only as a part of a whole, through which alone he can realize his heart's desire. Most of us cling to our life here with tenacity and hail with relief any prospect of extending it. We push the thought of death as far into the future as possible. In no way do we relate ourselves to the past. But what if life, our life, all life, is infinitely wider, grander, deeper than we have any conception, not merely as a hope for the few, but as a positive fact for all, not only in the future but now, needing only our realization of the truth? Here is a story with joy at its heart, and with, I like to think, illuminating shining through it, its pages like the beam of a lighthouse comforting the storm-tossed mariner. It is my earnest hope that from it will emerge for you a new understanding of the wonder and glory and divine presence of the magnificent Creator, a King of love, eternal in his patience, perfect in his planning, immanent in every human thought and passion, and for man himself a heritage that is certain, delayed only in time, melting all his frustrations and longings in a future that is a picture without edges. Ripley, Webb.